Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Michael Gove, is with us now. Mr Gove, thank you for joining us on the programme. So many questions as a result of what the Prime Minister had to say, so little time to ask them. So here we go. Who can go out?
We want to make sure that people stay at home whenever they can. People can go out once a day for exercise, a walk, a run or a cycle ride. It's also the case that people can go to the shops in order to make sure they get essential goods. But generally, wherever people can stay at home, they should. The only people who should not be staying at home are those who absolutely need to be at their place of work and who cannot work from home.
And that means builders can go to work?
In specific circumstances, yes.
And that means that people who work in car rental offices can go to work?
It should be the case that when it comes to cars, that garages should remain open in order to ensure that people get the petrol that they need and in order to make sure that they get the repairs that they need. But it shouldn't be the case that car showrooms are open, no.
Not car showrooms, car rentals.
If it's appropriate in order to make sure that people get the rental vehicle that they need, but social distancing should apply. And I'm sure that firms will recognise the importance of making sure that if people do need rental vehicles or people do need to get access to additional cars, that they do so in a way which keeps both parties safe. OK,
we were looking at some scenarios in the office this morning, questions as a result of our friends talking to us. Let me put some of them to you and hopefully you can clear this up for us. I'm a freelance journalist. I'm driving on the motorway. My work is not essential at this time. Will I be pulled over by the police and will I have to explain my movements?
It's unlikely that anyone's going to be pulled over by the police, but people should be at home, working at home, wherever they can.
I am taking a neighbour's dog for a walk because they're too scared to go out and do it themselves. Is that OK?
It should be the case that neighbour should do the dog walking themselves. We should minimise contact between households. If you've got dogs at home and you want to walk that dog, of course you should walk that dog, but only one walk or one other exercise a day.
I'm taking a toddler for a walk in the park and there are already other parents gathering in large numbers. Do I contact the authorities?
You should, wherever possible, try to encourage people not to gather in that way. And if you are genuinely worried, then of course contact the authorities. But it should be the case that if you are, for example, going for a walk in the park with a member of your immediate family and you see other people gathering in that way, then if you can, you should try to seek to get them to recognise the clear guidance that the government has given.
You misspoke earlier about what should happen to children who parents have separated. Can you just clarify the situation?
Yes, absolutely. I was asked on another programme, on Piers Morgan's Good Morning Britain programme, about this, and I was not clear. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be clear. It is the case that if you're divorced or separated, and you have children who are under the age of 18, those children can move from one parent's home to another parent's home as appropriate. Now, we want to try to reduce the amount of movement between homes, but there is a clear exception here, and I want to make it clear that I was not, when I was being interviewed on Piers Morgan's programme, as clear as I should have been in specifying that there is this exception.
And also, to be clear, it's Susanna Reid's programme as well. Talk to me about why the Prime Minister decided to take the action that he did last night. Why is it taking so long?
The Prime Minister follows scientific advice, and we act at the right time given the data that we have, the facts that we have about the nature of the spread of the disease.
We know what you've thought about experts in the past. Why are you taking notice this time?
I was quoted in the past about a small group of economists. I certainly believe that when it comes to medicine, that scientists are people whose advice we should take very seriously.
He had been urged to go further for a while, though, the Prime Minister hadn't he? Did he finally realise, reluctantly, that people in the United Kingdom would not listen unless they were forced to?
Well, naturally, all of us would never want to be in a position where we impose the sorts of restrictions that are now being imposed. All of us are naturally people who cherish the fact that the UK is a land of liberty, but we do need to take steps in order to make sure that people comply with the rules.
The Health and Foreign Secretary, one of your old colleagues, neither of those jobs anymore, although he is the chairman of the Health Committee, saying this is much too late by the government, talking about Jeremy Hunt, of course. He said the writing was on the wall, and I wonder how you think that history will look back at this government's response, whether even when your own members of your own colleagues think it was too little, too late.
I think the most important thing now is not to look back, but to do everything that we can in order to ensure that the instructions that have been put in place are followed. People will form their own judgment at some point in the future. What I'm concerned about now is making sure that we do everything possible to protect the NHS, and that means that wherever possible, people should stay at home.
Do you acknowledge that it could have been too late? We are too late in making these decisions. We knew what was happening. It's okay to say, yeah, you know, it's okay to accept our mistakes. We knew what was happening with China. We knew what was happening with Italy. We thought that we could convince the British public to behave in a proper manner, and they didn't. And we saw what happened at the weekend. The sun came out. They were climbing Snowdon.
I think that we've followed advice at every stage on what is the appropriate measure to take, and I think that's the right thing to do. In a democracy, it's perfectly understandable that people have a range of views and to disagree. Judgments can be formed now. Judgments will be formed in due course. I think the most important thing now, though, is to do everything that we can as individuals in our communities and in government to follow the steps which will limit the spread of this disease.
How long do you think we'll be in lockdown? The Prime Minister said 3 weeks during his address. It wasn't off the cuff, you know, it was scripted. He was reading it from an auto cue. 3 weeks.
Yes.
Does that mean in 3 weeks' time we're all going to be OK and we can go back to work?
It means that we will review in 3 weeks' time exactly how these measures are working. Let me be clear. This is a public health emergency, a national emergency. We must do everything that we can to stop this virus spreading. As the Prime Minister said in his statement, if the virus spreads in an unconstrained way, that will overwhelm the health services of any nation. So that's why we're taking the steps that we're taking. That's why it's vital that people follow them. We will keep it under review, and in 3 weeks' time we'll be able to say whether or not the path that we followed needs any further intensification, or whether there are one or two of the existing restrictions that may be capable of being lifted. But for the moment, the most important thing is that people in the days ahead follow this advice.
What does that 3 weeks look like? So over the next 3 weeks, we're going to see an increase daily on the number of deaths. Is it going to, we've all seen the charts of how the graph goes up even higher and quicker than we've seen in Italy. Is that what you are preparing for as government?
Well, one of the things that we want to do, and I think other European countries are taking a similar approach as well, is to ensure that we take the steps now in order to reduce the spread of the virus. If you reduce the spread of the virus, if fewer people are infected, then the pressure on the NHS is reduced as well, and that means that the NHS can not only treat those who are infected, it can also treat people with other conditions which are life-threatening as well. That is the most critical thing, and as a result of the steps that are being taken, we can alter the future. The spread of infection is not something which is entirely autonomous, entirely separate from our actions. All of us as individuals can play our part in reducing the spread of infection, and that is an absolutely vital thing to do in order to protect the NHS.
I wondered if I could press you, though, to answer the question, Mr Gove. Are we expecting hundreds, if not thousands, of deaths over the next 3 weeks?
It depends on what we do.
Well, we're locked down, aren't we? We're locking, people are at home.
Yes.
Most people are at home. If people do what you're asking, are we still expecting hundreds, if not thousands, of deaths before this curve starts to bottom out?
Well, there are two things, Kay. The first thing is we want to make sure that we limit infection. If we limit infection, then we can limit the pressure on the NHS and we can save more lives. And then the second thing, of course, is that we need to make the NHS stronger and more resilient, and that means that the ventilators that we are bringing on stream, the personal protection equipment that we are ordering, the additional NHS staff who've rallied to the cry to come back and to help, all of those resources and individuals can be deployed on the front line, and we can save more lives. I don't want to get into a game of predicting what will happen. I simply want to act now with others in order to reduce the number of people who are at risk.
Give me a number, please, Mr. Gove. I'm giving the opportunity to shock people into staying at home. And that, in order to do that, it's to say, if you don't, then thousands more people will die.
Well, I think the thing is that anyone who wants to know how important it is to stay at home, if you look at what's been happening in Italy, if you listen to those on the front line of the NHS, it is clear. I don't think that people need any further recognition of the scale of what might happen unless everyone takes appropriate action to reduce infection than seeing the terrible scenes that have occurred in other countries.
True. I wonder if that's true, Mr. Gove, because we've got some pictures to show you. The tubes are absolutely packed this morning. People are not listening. They're not abiding by the 2-metre rule. We had our helicopter up over Battersea, Lewisham, that sort of area. That is the hotspot for the country at the moment for deaths of coronavirus. People are not listening. What they need is to be shocked into realising that if they continue to do this, I don't know, you tell me, hundreds, thousands more people will die? Tell me.
It is the case that unless people take appropriate steps now, then the NHS will be under more strain. And if the NHS is under more strain, then those that we love, those that we care for most, are at risk of losing their lives. And we can talk about abstract numbers, but I think the most important thing for all of us is to recognise that the human relationships that we value depend on protecting those that we care about. And all of us will have someone in our lives who we know may be vulnerable because of age or other factors. We love them. We want them to stay safe. The best way of keeping them safe is to stay at home, to limit your time outside to that one piece of exercise every day or that minimum shopping. That's the most important thing.
But Mr. Gove, I'm a mother, you're a dad. Why are you tiptoeing through the raindrops here? Why don't you just tell people who are watching you, you know, our audience figures are through the roof at the moment, people are desperate for information. Why don't you just tell them that unless they stay at home, hundreds and thousands of people will die? Why don't you just tell them that? That is something that will shock our viewers into realising that they can't go out, they can't go to the pub, they can't stand around in gatherings like we've seen this morning. It's continuing on.
Unless you stay at home, then the people you love most may die. Yes.
Thank you. What about people who want to get out of the city with their loved ones and go to places like the Lake District or to the north of Scotland or to their second homes? Are they not then taking pressure off the NHS in those areas where the hotspots are?
No.
Why not?
They should stay at home. They should not be at risk of spreading the virus across the country, and nor should they be at risk of putting a strain on the NHS in other parts of the country. The advice is clear. Stay at home, and all non-essential travel should end.
Are you grounding flights?
It is the case that we're doing everything possible to reduce the number of flights, yes.
Are we going to see airports like Heathrow, etc., closed down for now?
It is the case that we keep under review the operation of our airports, but we also need to make sure that wherever possible, as the Foreign Secretary made clear last night, that people who are currently abroad, who are UK citizens, can come home. OK.
Are you confident that all Brits that want to come home will be able to get home in the time permitted, whether that's the end of the week or whatever?
We're doing everything we can to make that happen.
OK, but you can't guarantee that they'll be able to all get home?
We will do everything we can. There may be some individual UK citizens in particular parts of the world who may decide to stay there rather than come home, but the Foreign Secretary and the Transport Secretary are working incredibly hard to make sure that everyone who can come home is in a position to be able to do so. Yeah.
OK.